Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. How are you guys? Salam sejahtera semua. Okay, so in this video, I will present about the new chapter in our syllabus. The title is Hazards and Risk Identification. Okay, so this is the syllabus chapter for the EKA 1312, Safety and Health for Engineer. Okay, in this chapter, you will be learn about the uh, how to define, okay, how to define the hazards and the risk, and then it's about the tools that's commonly used in order to identify the hazards, and also how to classify the risk based on the hazard identified. Okay, so and then I will touch about the several uh, methods to analyze the risk, the hazard and risk by using any appropriate tools we call as the tree diagram. Okay, so next, as usual, about the learning outcomes. Okay, there are three learning outcomes to be achieved in this chapter. So the learning outcome number one is able to differentiate the hazards and risks and describe the definitions. So you must be able to differentiate between hazard and risk, and then you must be able to describe, okay, the hazard definition and also the risk definitions. And then the learning outcome number two, you must be able to demonstrate. Okay, you must be able to demonstrate how to define the hazards. So, for example, you go uh, any workplace, for example, and you have the surrounding of the industrial environment, and then from that place, you are able to define what kind of hazards, and then you can evaluate the risk based on the hazard that you find. Okay, and then the learner outcome number three, you must be able to demonstrate the tools in HIRARC process. As I mentioned before, the tools that's commonly used in the HIRARC process, like tree diagram, we call as the fault tree diagram analysis, and also the event tree diagram analysis. Okay, now before we go further about the hazard identification and risk control, okay, we call as HIRAC. So we must know the definition of terms that normally commonly used uh, in this hazard process. Okay, so what is the definition of hazard? As we can see here, the red sentence here is the keywords that I already uh, point for you. Okay, the hazard is about the potential for harm towards to the human in terms of injury or ill health. Okay, but not only for the human health and injury, but also potential to harm the property, which is a damage to the property, damage to the environment, or a combination of this. So this is hazard. The main uh, keyword is potential for harm. Okay, and then the hazard identification. The keyword is undesired events. Is a identify the undesired events. Uh, there's the event that leads to the materialization of the hazard and the mechanism by which those undesired event could occur. Okay, and then the hazard control is a process of implementing measure to reduce the risk associated with a hazard. So we already identify the hazard, and then we have to control that hazard. But before we control the hazard, we must to identify the risk level. Okay, in order before we go into implementing any tools or measures to reduce that risk. and reduce the hazard. Okay. So how about risk? The definition of risk is the combination of likelihood of an occurrence of a hazardous event with specified period or in specified circumstances and the severity of injury or damage to the health of people, property, environment, and so on. So the keyword for risk definition is likelihood of an occurrence, and then so within the specified period and specified circumstances. That's the risk. Okay. No hazard will be no risk. So if we identify the hazard, there will be the risk in that hazard. Okay. And then the risk assessment is the process of evaluating the risk. The keyword is evaluating. Okay, we evaluate that risk, okay, to safety and health arising from hazard at work. Okay, this hazard from hazard. As I mentioned, no hazard will no risk. If we have hazard, will be a risk there. Okay, and then the risk management. After we assess the risk, we manage the risk in order to control. So management is about the procedure. It's a procedure associated with identifying a hazard, assessing the risk, putting in place control measure and reviewing the outcome. Okay, the main purpose of risk management is about is in order to reduce the risk and also to reduce atau to cancel out the hazard. Okay, likelihood, as mentioned in the risk definition, is the keyword is likelihood. So what is the likelihood means? The meaning of the likelihood is the event likely to occur. Okay, within the specific period or in specified circumstances. So it's just like the probability to accident occur lah. And then the severity is an outcome from an event, such as severity of injury or health of people, or damage to property, to environment, or any combination of those. So the main formula for risk is equal to the likelihood multiplied by severity. Is the combination between likelihood and severity is equal to risk. Okay, so now we go to the safety analysis. Okay, in analysis process for the safety purpose, okay, there are three kind of analysis that we can apply. The first is we apply the HIRARC. HIRARC stand for the hazard identification, risk assessment, and risk control. And then the second analysis type is fault tree analysis, and the third is event tree analysis. This also we call as the tool to analyze the safety. Okay, for the HIRARC, HIRARC is the principle used in workplace to manage safety and health. This is the most commonly used by the industry, and one of the general duties for the employer as prescribed under Occupational Safety and Health Act 1994. Okay, because OSHA 1994 is a very widely used by the industry because it's covered not only for the machine but also covered for the employee health and illness and also the condition of the employee. Okay, so now we take a look the first analysis, safety analysis, which is the HIRARC, hazard identification, risk assessment, and risk control. What is the purpose of the HIRARC? Okay, the HIRARC, the keyword is to identify. Okay, identify all the factors that may cause harm to employees and others. Others means the environment, okay, the properties, or any combination of those. So the main keyword is to identify the factor or the likelihood or the possibilities that may cause harm. The second purpose is to consider what the chances or of that harm actually be falling. So this also uh, we call as the risk lah. Okay, so anyone in the circumstances of a particular case and the possible severity that could come from it. This is also the we can take as a definition of risk lah. Okay, and then to enable employers to plan, introduce and monitor, because the HIRARC process is the combination of the plan, assessment and the control. Okay, planning of HIRARC. HIRARC activities should be planned and conducted by the industry based on two conditions. First one is for situation, based on the situation where the hazard appear to pose significant threat, and then uncertain whether existing control are adequate or not, and then before implementing corrective or preventive measures. So based on the situation, okay, the situation of the workplace environment, we can define the hazard. There's everywhere appeared the hazard actually. Just we only have to have the knowledge how to identify that hazard, and then based on the HIRARC process that already implemented before, we have to know whether the existing control is already implemented and adequate or not. And then also HIRARC process is the planning of HIRARC process must be conducted, okay, before we implementing the corrective or preventive measures, because we don't, without the HIRARC process we don't know how to do the corrective implementation. Okay, and then by organization, in the industry organization intending to continuously improve OSH management system, because they want to comply the requirement and the needs of the OSHA 1994 Act. Okay, so this is the process of the HIRARC. As we can see here, it starts from the classify the work activities, and then followed by the identify hazards, and then the risk assessment, risk control, and the review risk control. As we can see, the arrangement of the process here is first is identify the hazard. Okay, before you going to assess the risk, we have to identify what type and kind of the hazard. But before that, we have to classify what kind of the work activities. Okay, we will see the example of the work activities after this. Okay, and in the risk assessment, there are several methods that's commonly used by the industry, and I will show you after this. Okay, about the classify the work activities. This a different company trade has a different activities. For example, UTEM, our university, their trade is about education. So the activities is about the education. So what kind of the hazard that's commonly available in education field? As we know, in education field, we face with the lot of the laboratories equipment, right? And for example, in our faculty of electrical engineering, there are a lot of the machine that's use very high, not high, the medium or low to the medium voltage supply. So that one has the hazard that we can identify, and then in the laboratory environment itself also has the hazards. Okay, and then the classification may be divided into two, which are by work area, okay, or the by work process. Work area, for example, for education, the area is in a laboratory area, for example. So what kind of the hazard that we can identify in the laboratory, for example. And then the work process, for example, we has the workshop for the domestic wiring. Okay, so the area is the workshop, laboratory, and the work process is wiring process of the domestic wiring. Okay, but for example, in the figure as shown in this presentation, this is the example of the work area or process and the process of the flow chart of the work, the process lah. Okay, for example, the work area is HEG, homogeneous exposure group, and then similar exposure group. This is the work area in the industrial, commonly in the industrial, and what kind of the process or the activity that's uh, considered in this area. Okay, so this is the flow chart. We have the raw material, and then we cut the material or the bending, pressing process, and then welding. After that, we transport and loading for the drilling and abrasion process, another process. Okay, and then painting, plating, chrome plating, for example, packing, and lastly, we go to the trading. So this is the common process in industry, in the factory. So from this process, we actually can imagine what kind of the hazards that will be available. For example, in the cutting process, this is the large hazard, the severe hazard that we can define, we can identify in this process, cutting process, because the risk of the cutting process is very high. Okay, and then the bending also, pressing. Okay, so what is the lowest risk in this process? The lowest risk is packing. It might be packing process is the lowest risk. Okay, next, identify the hazard. So before we identify the hazard in our environment, so we must know the source of the hazard, where the hazard is come from. First, the human factor, the human behavior, okay, the unsafe act, the lack of training and rushing. Okay, the lack of training. The training is very important, and this is the duty of the employer to give the train to the employee, especially for the employee that's usually doing the work with the machine. So they must have the knowledge how to protect themselves during the during how what can say conducting that the machine. Okay, and then the machinery, maybe the installation of the machinery is improper or inadequate, and then the layout and the design of the equipment, maybe the position, the location of the machine is not suitable. Okay, and then about the maintenance of the machine, inadequate maintenance. They are not implement the preventive maintenance or the routine maintenance for that particular machine. So that will be the factor of the source of the hazard. And then handling the materials. Okay, substances such as chemical and gases used in the workplace, storage and disposal. Okay, how to handle the material. We for example, we must use the PPE, personal protective equipment, in order to handle properly. Okay, the high risk material, for example, and then the method, the way people carry out their work. Okay, that's why the training is very very important, because we want to give the knowledge to the employee on how to properly use any particular machine or any particular work. And then the medium, the workplace condition, air quality, ventilation, lighting, noise, vibration, and etc. This is the duty of the employer to their employee. Okay. And then the methods of the identifying hazard. Okay. Uh, okay. So first, by the document review. Okay. Uh, Basically, before we start to identify the new hazard or the existing hazard, we must know the history. Okay, the history of the record that already records during the last of the HIRARC implementation, HIRARC process. Okay, so we already know what kind of the incidents, okay, the frequency of the incident happen, okay, and then what kind of the monitoring process for that hazard, and then any medical surveillance record available for that hazard. And then the second one is second method is by workplace inspection, by doing the inspection. Inspection is very important because without the inspection, we don't know the hazard. We will not notify the hazard. So inspection in the HIRARC process is compulsory lah. Okay. So the hazard at workplace existing and potential. Okay, or not only the existing ones, but we must to do the inspection in order to identify the new hazard, for example. And then the existing control by engineering, administrative, or the PPE. We inspect whether the work process is compulsory or what we call by using the employee use the PPE or not in order to handle the material or handle the machine. Okay, and then it's about the engineering, whether the machine is properly maintained or not. And then the administrative, is there any tagging or any notice to control, to prevent from the damaged machine to be used, for example. Okay. So this is the situation, example, that we can identify the hazard. So how many hazard that we can find from this situation? For example, lifting patients incorrectly. Okay, lifting patient incorrectly is also the type of hazard. Okay, where is the number 2? Okay, maybe the number 2 is this dustbin. It's not properly clean. Okay, and then the pool of water on floor is the wet floor. Okay, the wet floor akan membuatkan orang terjatuh lah, falling down. Okay, that's the risk. The hazard is water on floor. Okay, and then aggressive persons. As we can see, the person carrying the chair to harm the other people. Okay, so the risk is this chair will be harm the other people. That's the risk. And then the needle lying around. Needle lying around is the hazard. So what is the risk? Okay, so the risk, someone will be terjatuh lah. Okay, akan jatuh, terpijak, step on that needle, and this needle is very very sharp and will the possibilities to injury, okay, the risk of the injury lah might be happen. Okay, and then nurse not using glove. Okay, not using glove. The nurse not using the PPE. That's the hazard. So what is the risk that might be happen? The likelihood might be occur is the infection might be occur to from the patient to the nurse or to the doctor. Okay, and then the cord on floor. Okay, this is a serious hazard, and this one we can find in our laboratories. But now, our laboratory is already, this code is already perfectly or properly uh, inside the trunk, the cable trunk. Okay, so what's the possibilities of risk for this hazard number 7, the cord on floor? Okay, will harm to other people. Okay, orang akan tersadung ke, tersepak ke, akan jatuh, falling down, for example. And then the bed blocking exit. This is the fire exit. Fire exit is very, very important, especially during the fire emergency. Okay, so it's not suggested to block any fire door. The fire door must be always closed. Okay, because this is this door is the purpose of fire door is to restrict the fire. Okay, untuk mengelakkan, to prevent the fire daripada merebak lah. So must not be blocking lah. So that the punya risk dia apa? The risk dia, if the fire emergency happen or occur, so everybody will be apa? Cemas, bahasa Inggeris apa? Panic. Okay. So when the everybody in the building panic, okay, there will be another risk, which is another injury will be happen, because this bed already blocked the exit door. Okay, so next, in this is the factory environment lah. Okay, how many hazard can you find? The first hazard, rubbish on ground. Okay, rubbish on ground is also a hazard. And then number 2, unsecured chemical. Okay, there's no prevention control by the industry. Walaupun kita lihat ada line kat sini, okay, but the people that working in this place, okay, they ignore that particular line. Okay, this line is actually has their own meaning lah sebenarnya. This is the barrier. Okay, the barrier ataupun the limitation of the worker. Patutnya this forklift cannot be there inside. They must be beyond the line. Okay. So chemical ni unsecure is the hazard. So what is the risk of the unsecured chemical? For example, if the possibilities happen to this chemical, maybe ada leaking or whatever, so akan membuatkan this lantai, okay, this floor become wet. Okay. And then number 3, the machine guarding lifted. As we can see, the machine guard dah terbuka, exposed. So the risk will be injury the operator. Okay. And then number 4, water on floor will become slip or trip the cable cord. Okay, number 5, stack material unevenly. Okay, not stacking properly. Okay, the hazard might be happen, for example, this material falling down and then make another injury to other people, harm to the other people. And then number 6, person walking in front of forklift. Okay, ni dia ada blind spot. Okay, this forklift driver has their own blind spot. Maybe dia tak sedar the availability of this person. So the risk is this person will be this forklift akan melanggar dia lah. So dia akan injured lah. Okay. And then the pallet blocking fire exit. Another example, fire exit must be not blocked by the any item lah. Okay. And then the forklift stack too high and driver cannot see. This make the driver and cannot see the ability of the person in front him. Okay. And then another example, how many hazard can you find? This is the situation in office. Okay, this is might be happen. Okay, and also it's actually frequently happen in office environment lah. For example, uneven floor, carpeting trip hazard. Okay, uneven floor. Mungkin floor ni dia pakai carpet, tapi carpet ni dia tak even lah. Okay, apa risiko dia akan membuatkan orang tersadung, tersepak dan sebagainya lah. And then the second one is files on floor, okay, or rubbish on floor. And then number 3, sitting at desk, repetitive movement. This one is the ergonomic hazard lah. Okay. So what is the risk that possibility happen to her? Might be the illness, okay, the illness or injury, body injury, for example. And then number 4, box and file stack too high. This one, okay. And then number 5, overloading trolley to move file. And then number 6, printer placed on floor instead of on table. This one is the control, okay, engineering control lah. This printer must be properly placed on the suitable or appropriate table lah. Okay. Then number 7, where's number 7? Okay, cot on ground. As I mentioned, this one is commonly happen lah. Okay, in any environment lah, not only the office. The cot on the ground, they are not properly arranged in the trunk. Okay, so the risk might be happen is electrical shock. Okay, electrical trip, for example. And then number 8, workstation ergonomic. Okay, workstation ergonomic, di tempat workbench ni terlalu banyak material. Okay, so ergonomic, this screen supposed to be in front of the worker, not on the side lah. Kalau awak lihat kat sini, dia buat kerja sambil kepala dia menoleh ke kiri. So this one is the repetitive movement actually. Okay. Then number 9, rocking on chair. And this one is the human factor lah. Dia sendiri yang buat benda tu. So falling down lah dia punya risk. Okay. And then number 10, a person carrying too much at once. So this one is economic hazard. Okay. So now we go to the risk assessment. We already take a look at how to classify the work process. Okay, depends on the work process, and then we go to the how to identify the hazard. There are many type of hazard that we can find in our environment. Even you in home just now, your surrounding is actually has the hazard. Okay, cumanya how to identify that hazard je awak kena tahu. And awak kena tahu apa jenis hazard yang ada di sekeliling awak. Itu je. Okay, next is about the risk assessment. Okay, determining the severity and likelihood. As I mentioned before, the basic formula for risk is the combination between the likelihood and the severity. Okay, of the hazard occurrence in 3 types of approach. So this one is, as I mentioned before, the risk assessment. There are several types of the methods or the approach that commonly used by the industry. Okay, so the first types approach is a quantitative approach. is the based on the table scale. And then the next approach is the semi-quantitative, which is the based on statistic. And then the third one is the qualitative. So we take a look each of them. The first one is the quantitative, based on table scale. Okay, but before that, before we start the risk assessment, we have to determine, okay, the severity and the likelihood. Okay, first determining the severity in terms of harm to health, damage to property, damage to environment, or combination of above. Okay, we have to think about the risk not only to the human health, but we have to think also about the damage to the property, damage to the environment, and so on. Okay, not only focusing on the human health. And then determining the likelihood of hazard occurring based on number of time activities performed, okay, and the number of time of hazard occurrence. Okay, so for example, the time number of time activity performs, the likelihood that might be happen. For example, the economic hazards, as we seen from the previous slides, is about in the office, in the office environment. One person use the repetitive movement. That is the kind of the economic hazard. So what is the likelihood of the risk in this type of hazard? Okay, so we have to clarify the number of the time activities has been performed, and the number of times of hazard occurrence. Maybe that hazard cannot be demolished or cannot be cancelled because of, for example, the machine. Okay, without that machine, okay, the work cannot be done, for example. So whatever is, that machine must be working by the operator. Okay, so in one day, how many hour that machine operate? So we have to identify the times of the hazard, because that machine itself is the hazard. Okay, and then the quantitative risk assessment. The purpose of this risk assessment approach is tends to deal with the avoidance of flow probability events with serious consequences. So the keyword is, okay, the event with serious consequences to the plants and the surrounding environment. So the keyword is consequence. Okay, the probability, kebarangkalian yang berlaku, okay, disebabkan kepada apa. And then commonly used in industry. And then this quantitative risk assessment approach use the table scale during the judgment on the consequence and probability. Okay. In the risk assessment, we face with the judgment process lah actually. Okay, first the severity level. Okay, as we can see, this is the table that's commonly used by the industry, and then the definition of each severity might be different depending on the work process, okay, or the activity. So the severity level can be divided into catastrophic, fatal, serious, minor or negligible. And the example is actually to describe that severity level. And then this rating is actually the score. This is the score or the judgment of our the judgment of the inspector lah. Okay, for example, for the negligible, so minor abrasion, bruise, cuts, first aid type injury. So this hazard, okay, the risk or the severity because of that hazard might be only require the first aid type injury only. So the score is only 1. The most severity rating is number 5, which is if this severity level is a catastrophic level, so the numerous fatalities in irrecoverable property damage and productivity. This is the most uh, huge or the most severe lah, might be happen. Okay, for the fatal, for example, if this incident happen, might be approximately one single fatality major property damage if hazard is realized. So actually this example is um, besides of this is the description of the severity level, but this also to uh, clarify, okay, what will be happen when this severity or the hazard is realized. Okay, and the likelihood level, as we can see, is most likely possible, conceivable, okay, remote, or inconceivable. Okay, the description of each of the likelihood level here is, for example, inconceivable is practically impossible and has never occurred. Okay, so the hazard, we identify the hazard, and then that hazard, the risk or the likelihood level of that hazard, if that hazard is realized, is might be impossible or has never occurred. The incident might be not impossible to occur, or the maybe we identify the hazard, and then we try to assess, or we try to uh, take a look the severity of the likelihood of that kind of hazard. Okay, and then at the at at the at the end, we realize that that hazard, okay, the likelihood level is inconceivable, so it's impossible to occur the injury to or harm the other people, harm to the property, for example. It's never occurred, so the rating is number 1. Okay, and then remote level has not been known to occur after many years. Okay, so this is long term lah, long term punya risk lah, ataupun the likelihood, ataupun the circumstance, or sorry, is the long period of the likelihood lah, ataupun possibilities that might be happen lah to that hazard. And then conceivable might be occur at some times in future. Ini possibilities yang akan berlaku masa akan datang lah, yang kita tak tahu. Okay, this one is actually in order to choose, okay, that hazard is under what level of the likelihood level. It actually depends on our, for example, our knowledge, our experience, or maybe from the record from the previous hazards assessment, for example. Okay, and then the possible has a good chance of occurring and is not unusual. Okay, tak pernah berlaku sebelum ni, tapi benda ni akan berlaku. So kita boleh agak possibilities tu akan berlaku. So kita boleh letak rating number 4 lah. Okay, the most likely result of the hazard event being realized, memang akan berlakunya. Contohnya macam sekarang ni apa? COVID-19. COVID-19 is the hazard. So what is the likelihood? What is the risk assessment for that COVID-19 hazard? Okay, the infection is most likely happen. So the likelihood level for COVID-19 is rating number 5. For example, because the infection is very very sure, memang akan berlaku infection kalau kita tak ikut SOP. Okay, and then still under the quantitative risk assessment, this one is the risk matrix. So after we identify the severity and also the likelihood score, and then we can identify uh, the level of the risk, either high level, medium level, or low level, by using the matrix. Okay, we call as the risk matrix. For example, if we confirm that the severity of that hazard is 5, and also the likelihood is 5, so 5 multiplied by 5 is equal to 25. So 25 is already under the high level. So means that the green color, yellow color, and also the red color, we can uh, summarize it with the range of the number lah. So for example, for the low level of the risk, we can see that's the severity and the likelihood. Okay, as I mentioned, the risk equal to severity multiply likelihood. So severity and likelihood between number 1 to 4. The range 1 to 4 is considered low risk. And then 5 to 12 is considered as medium risk, while the start from 15 to 25 is considered as high risk. Okay. So, for the quantitative risk assessment also, the priority action, this one is already take into the range of the high, medium, or low risk level. So this is the action. What is the action to be implement for the low risk, for the medium risk, and for the high risk? So you can read this action. Okay. For example, for the low risk, a risk identified as low may be considered as acceptable, and further reduction may not be necessary. Okay, the keyword is may. This hazard might be can only be reduced by any other action, or maybe not necessary to reduce. Okay. However, if the risk can be resolved quickly and efficiently, control measures should be implemented and recorded. Okay. And then for the medium risk level, is the risk requires a planned approach to controlling the hazard and applies temporary measure if required. Okay, action taken must be documented on the risk assessment form, including date for completion. Okay, and then for the high level risk, okay, the action is immediate. The immediate action must be implemented. So for the high risk level, the keyword is immediate. The action to be implemented is immediately to be implemented for any control, any preventive measure, for example. Okay, but as we can see, for high level, medium level, and the low level risk, all the action must be recorded. For what? Because this record data is very useful for the next HIRARC process implementation. Okay. Okay, for the semi-quantitative risk assessment, okay, for this one, we take a risk for a while. Okay. For the semi-quantitative risk assessment, as I mentioned before, for the second approach of the risk assessment is the semi-quantitative, which is based on the statistic. Okay, use the statistical numerical rating scales for consequence and probability, and combine them to produce a level of risk using a formula. Okay, yang ini dia tak sama dengan quantitative. So in order to implement the risk assessment, we can use any these three risk assessment approach. This one is the second one lah. Okay, they still to identify the consequence and the probability, okay, of the risk. Likelihood and severity is also, because the formula is risk equal to likelihood multiply the severity. But for the semi-quantitative, we apply the statistical method lah, okay, by using the numerical. As we can see here, the severity level number 1 until number 4. Number 1 is the first aid and near miss. Okay, excuse me, somebody call me, so I have to pause this presentation for a while. Okay, for the semi-quantitative, as we can see, the severity of level from level number 1 to level number 4, and also the likelihood is level number 1 and to level number 4. But for this semi-quantitative, there is no example or no description of each of the severity level lah. Tapi kat sini we can see it's the occurrence lah, like the occurrence of the uh, risk might be happen for that particular hazard lah. For example, yearly happen, monthly happen, weekly happen, and daily happen. For the daily happen, the level of likelihood is higher lah. Okay, but depends on the severity. But severity, maybe the small injury might be happen, which only need the first aid, okay, to solve the problem, okay. But the hazard, okay, the accident might likelihood, okay, to be happen daily. So the risk is only 4 lah. 4 multiplied by 1, okay, only 4. Okay, walaupun kita lihat satu hazard tu ada, okay, tapi tak semestinya hazard tu dia mempunyai severity and likelihood yang tinggi lah. It depends on our assessment lah. Okay, so this risk assessment is not only decide by the one person lah. Okay, actually this assessment is done by the group, okay, group of the inspector lah. Because lain orang lain dia punya apa suggestion, opinion kan. Okay, so ada some people think that hazard likelihood might be monthly happen, but some people might be think that hazard incident might be happen weekly, for example. Okay, so that decision of the assessment is not only for done by one person lah. And then the qualitative tadi apa, semi quantitative, this one is qualitative. The qualitative risk assessment is the third risk assessment approach. Okay, defines consequence, probability and level of risk by significant level such as high, medium and low. So yang ini dia just classify the likelihood and severity based on based on class low, medium ataupun high. Okay, still we assess based on the likelihood and the severity. Okay, tapi kita akan lihat sama ada dia low, medium atau high sahaja. That's one is the qualitative. Okay, so there are 3 risk assessment approach. Okay, we use the HIRARC. We have to use the quantitative, semi-quantitative and the qualitative approach. But the most common used by the industry is quantitative, because the quantitative risk assessment approach is more details compared to the others lah. And then the risk control. Okay, consideration in implementing the risk control. So after we clarify the work activities, then we identify the hazard. After that, we assess the risk. We take a look the likelihood, and then we take a look the severity that might be happen for that particular hazard. And then now, how to control that risk. We already classified that risk either medium, high, or low risk after the assessment. Now is the time to control that risk. So before we start to implement the control, what kind of the consideration before we implementing the risk control? First, we have to review the measures regularly modify if necessary. Second one, comply with national law and regulation. Okay, we must to consider to comply with the act lah, regulation done by the DOSH. And then reflect good management practice. Good management practice is might be refer or related to the cost lah. Okay, mungkin in order to control that risk, and at the same time this not costly lah. Okay. Kemudian another consideration, we have to consider the current stage of knowledge. Okay, maybe we based on the experiment, not experiment, based on our experience. Okay, that's why the data record is very very important, because from that data we know that hasn't is happened, or maybe the incident is happened before. So we know that maybe walaupun kita dah buat control sebelum ni, we have already implement the risk control before, but the incident still happen, still occur. Okay, maybe that control is not suitable to control that risk, so we have to consider another type of risk control lah. Okay, so include information or reports from organisations such as DOSH and others. Okay, dalam kita implement the risk control, kita kena consider report. Kita kena report, because any layout mission change, we have to report to DOSH. So any new machine installation, we have to report to DOSH, for example. Okay. So this one is the hierarchy of the risk control. As we can see, the elimination is the highest, because the elimination is the most effective to control the risk. We have to eliminate that hazard. Sometimes that hazard can be eliminated. For example, there's the big tree. Okay, ada pokok besar di satu kawasan in any particular area. Okay, dan pokok besar tu hazard, apa risk dia maybe damage to the property, and maybe the more severity, maybe pokok tu tumbang and can harmful to the other people. Okay, then the most effective risk control is to eliminate that tree. Kita buang pokok tu, so habis, dah tak ada hazard dah. Okay, and then substitution, we replace the hazard. Maybe kita gunakan satu mesin yang besar, okay, kita tukarkan kepada mesin yang lebih kecil. So we replace that hazard actually. And the engineering control isolate the people from the hazard. So maybe that's a particular machine cannot be done by all the people. Maybe must be operated by the competent person. So kita kena ada satu engineering control lah to isolate. So maybe that machine must be operated by the competent person or certificate person lah. And the administrative control change the way people work. Ni contoh paling mudah adalah ketika COVID-19 yang berlaku sekarang ni. Apa yang berlaku adalah pada PKP yang pertama, okay, pihak universiti benarkan untuk semua pensyarah work from home. So this is the example of the change the way of the people work. Daripada their staff working their work in their own office, but now during the COVID-19, okay, they are allowed to do their work in their home. That's the example of the administrative control. And then PPE, protective personal equipment. So to protect the worker with the personal protective equipment. So maybe this is the least effective lah. The least effective because we cannot eliminate that hazard. For example, the chemical hazard. So that industry really depends on that substances. Okay, so we cannot eliminate that hazard, so we apply the PPE lah, the least effective. But at the same time, we also can apply the administrative control, engineering control, and so on at the same time. Okay, this is the engineering control example by modifying, redesigning, or replacing workstation and work areas. For example, materials, object, containers, design and handling, hand tools and equipment, ventilation system, process flow, and automation. So for engineering control, maybe we change the location of the machine to another suitable place. Okay. Kemudian we use the safety glass to protect the operator daripada berlaku sebarang apa nama cutting inilah benda yang dia contohnya lah, ini adalah mesin untuk wood cutting lah. Dalam proses dia cutting the wood, maybe sometimes the woods might be terpelanting lah. Kalau tak ada safety glass ni, maybe dia akan terpelanting kena muka operator. That's one is another risk lah. So in order to control that risk, okay, we can put the safety glass in order to protect the operator. Yang this one, we use the PPE, engineering control. Other than PPE, we use the another methods, which is we use the hose in order to suck the grind material lah, the grinded material into the vacuum cleaner. This one is we use the ventilation lah. This one is the ventilation process lah. We handling the chemical, okay, reaction. For example, this one asap ni sangat-sangat beracun lah, contohnya poison lah. So we have the ventilation in order to prevent from this asap ni tersebar, spread to another space lah. Okay. This one is an example of the administrative control. Administrative control is about maybe the employer. Okay, employer diorang wujudkan satu rules, okay, ataupun tagging, maybe considering the new procedures or SOP, the new policies, for example. This one is an example of the administrative control. Okay, macam yang saya bagi tahu contoh sebelum ni, they change the work, the people work, how they do the work from the daripada yang common yang diorang gunakan cara lain. For example, that's an example of administrative control. For example, McDonald, they only open for the takeaway order only during the COVID-19 in order to prevent from the infection, for example. Okay, and then the training also is the administrative control. Okay, they train the worker, train the employee so that the employee have their own knowledge how to operate the machine, for example. And then the PPE, okay, you know the PPE. What is the PPE? Okay, it's the personal protective equipment. We have the hard hat. Okay, kita ada the special glove, boots. Okay, we have the special glass to protect our eye, to protect our ears, for example. Okay, so now we go to the whole process of flow of the HIRARC implementation. This is the common practice of the HIRARC implementation. Start with the hazard identification, then we go to risk assessment, and then we go to the risk control. Mesti berturutan mengikut hazard identification, assessment, last control. Kita tak boleh control dulu, kemudian baru kita nak identify hazard. Must identify first. Okay, In the risk assessment is the process of scoring lah. We score that risk either medium, low or high risk, and then from that one we come up with the control, how to control depending on the score. Okay, this is the work example scenario, wood panel cutting process. So this is the implementation of the HIRARC. This one using the quantitative approach. Okay, as we can see, they divided into the work activity. Okay, and then depends on the work activity, they identify the hazard, and then they identify what kind of the effect or the cost to the hazard. For example, cutting. Okay, cutting blades. Cutting blades is the hazard. So what's the effect or the cost? Might be cuts or first aid type injury. And then the risk analysis, the likelihood happen is number 4, is quite high, but the severity is number 1 because it's only require the first aid type injury lah. So the risk is 4. 4 is low level of the risk. So the risk control for the low level, number 4, low level, is only use the leather hand glove, which is use the PPE. Okay, the PPE. And then the person in charge due date status is also under the risk control implementation. This one is another example. The wall exterior plastering work also use the quantitative approach. Okay, fault tree analysis. So we now go to the second safety analysis. The first safety analysis that we go through just now before this in previous slide is the HIRARC analysis. The second one is the fault tree analysis. Okay. Fault tree analysis concentrate on the end result. So the keyword is the end result. We think about the end result of the particular hazard. Okay, which is usually an accident or some other adverse consequence. And then another key point is consider all cases, procedure and the equipment. So the accident caused at least as often by the procedure errors as by equipment failures, and fault tree analysis is consider all the cases. And then the terms fault tree arise from the appearance of the logic diagram. So the fault tree analysis is about the logic diagram. We use the AND logic or the OR logic, okay, to analyze the probabilities associated with the various causes and their effects. Okay, the fault tree is a top-down approach, starting with the unwanted consequences as the top event and identifying all factors that could contribute to the top event. So we have the top event, and then we have the basic event, which contribute to the top event. Okay, and then use to think through possible causes of a loss, find most probable sequence of events leading to the loss, and to quantify the probability of loss. Okay, in order to implement this fault tree analysis, we have to think. Okay, we must think the possibilities that can happen. Okay, based on our experience, and based on knowledge. Okay, the leaf and the branch. Okay, we know that the tree have leaf and branch. Of the fault tree are the myriad individual circumstances or events that can contribute to an accident. And the base or trunk of the trees is the catastrophic accidents or other undesirable result being studied. So this is the symbol that commonly used. Okay, the basic symbol that commonly used in the fault tree analysis. We have the rectangle symbol, circle, diamond, oval indicates, okay, oval shape, and then we have the logic and the OR, logic OR. Okay, for the rectangle indicates an event to be analyzed further. This rectangle might be the top event might be the top event and might be the basic event to support the top event. Then the circle one is we call as the independent event Okay, independent event. The circle represent the basic fault event or primary failure of a component. It require no further development. So independent event which is no further development. So dia tak ada lagi branch lah. So the diamond is used for non-primal event which are not developed further for lack of information or insufficient consequences. And then the oval indicate condition is define the state of the system that permits a fault sequence to occur. It may be normal or result from failure. And then the AND and the OR gate indicates that the input event are required to cause the output event. So kalau AND gates means apa, OR gate means apa, kita tengok dalam slide, the next slide. Okay, the step to draw the fault tree. To draw the fault tree, take the following steps. First, determine the undesirable event, which we call as the top event. We use the rectangular symbol. And then determine the basic event, which could immediately cause the top event to support the top event. In this basic event, we might be use the circle. Okay, the circle symbol or diamond symbol or the oval symbol. Okay. And the third one is determine the relationship between the basic event, the top event. Either use the terms of AND or the OR gates. And then the last step is determine whether any of the basic event need further analysis or not. Okay. Kalau event tu need the further analysis, so we not using the circle symbol. We are using the rectangle. Okay, the rectangle symbol. This is the example number 1 to use how to use the AND gate example. Is a AND gate example. Consider a system with two component A and B. Okay, for example, we consider two component A and B. A and B might be the event So the system falls if both A and B fail. So the system fail, not fall. The system fails if both A and B fail. Draw the fault tree diagram for the system. Okay, so saya rasa awak dah belajar berkenaan dengan logic gate kan. Logic gate untuk AND, okay, the output of the logic AND gate is equal to 1 if and only if the both of the input is equal to 1. So kalau A dengan B is equal to 1, so the output of the AND gate is equal to 1. So kalau A is 1, B is 0, so the output is 0. Okay. So for example, we have the reality block diagram. We have the start and the end. Okay, event start and the end of the event, or the cause of the event, atau the probabilities of the event. Okay. The situation example like this, contohnya we have one event and then the cause that support this top event might be happen if and only if the basic event A and basic event B is occurred. Okay, so the fault tree diagram conversion from the reality block diagram is like this. This is the fault we call as the fault tree diagram. Okay, we take a look the example number 2 for the OR gate. Okay, macam awak dah pernah belajar OR gates, any input of the OR gates is equal to 1, so the output of the OR gate is also equal to 1. So for example, we have the 3 input A, B and C. So any either one of the input, for example, A equal to 1, B equal to 0, C equal to 0. So the output is equal to 1. This is the rules of the OR gates lah, in the logic gates. So in here, If the occurrence of ideal input event cause the output event to occur, then these input events are connected using AND OR GET. Kalau event tu akan berlaku salah satu, kita boleh gunakan OR GET. Kalau output tu ataupun penyebab ataupun the cause of the event occurs is happen due to the both of the fail event, so then we use the AND GET. Kita akan tengok dalam example berikutnya. Okay, for example number 3, consider a case of an overheated motor. Okay, overheated motor. Okay, the basic events could be the primary motor fails or excessive current loads to the motor. So the top event is overheated motor. So the basic event is the primary motor fails or the excessive currents load to the motor. So kat sini kita akan gunakan, dipakai keyword OR kat sini, so kita akan gunakan OR GET. And then the current load might be excessive. Okay, current load, which is the one basic event, might be excessive due to excess current flow in the circuits and the failure of the fuse. So under the basic event excessive current load, we have the another two basic event, which is excess current flow in the circuit and the failure of the fuse. As the information given in this example, okay, the current load might be excessive. That's happen if the current the excessive current is only if the current flow in the circuit and the failure fuse happen. So we can use the AND GET. Okay, it could be either short circuiting or power surge that contribute to the excess current flow. Okay, the excess current flow, short circuit or the power surge that contribute to the excess current flow. Okay, so this is the solution of that example 3. We have the top event here is the motor overheat, and then the another two basic event that support the top event is either primary motor failure or excessive motor current to the motor. So we can use the OR GET lah. And then under the excessive current to motor, okay, in order to the cause possibility happen to the excessive current motor is happen only if both of the basic event here is happen lah. Okay, excessive current in motor and primary failure fuse fail to open. Dua-dua ni berlaku, barulah berlakunya excessive current motor. Itu maksud dia. Okay, but for the excessive current in motor might be happen if either one of this event happen, either primary wiring failure or the primary power supply surge. Okay, salah satu berlaku, akan berlaku ni. Tapi kalau sini berlaku, sini tak berlaku, dia tak akan berlaku ni. Itu maksud dia. Jadi the probability of the top event, the motor overheat, okay, as mentioned, is obtained by combining the base event according to logic rules. For this case, the probability is equal to C plus D multiplied by B and plus A. How to get this? This is the we call as the Boolean expression for the logic gate. Asal awak dah belajar kot ni. Okay, so for example, our C and D go to the OR gate. OR gate, the expression of the OR gate is the input number 1 plus to the input number 2. So that's why we have C plus D here. Okay, and then this one is the C plus D lah, expression dia. Jadi C plus D expression kat sini. This one is the AND gate, but this one is a B. That's why we have multiply this equation to this equation to this B. That's why we have C plus D multiplied by B. So this one C plus D multiplied by B. This one, this expression. Okay, so this one is the OR gate. OR gate is expression for the OR gate is plus. The plus of the input lah. So we have the inputs here and another input here. this A, and this one is C plus D multiply B. Because of D is O get, so just we plus lah, tambah A ni. Ini cara untuk kita nak terbitkan expression ni. Okay, for the exercise. Okay, means that this value, this this event might be not only labeled as A, B, C and D, but it might be labeled with the number. Okay, the number, for example, 0.06, 0.04, 0.006 and 0.01. Then this number might be different, okay, depending on the situation lah. This one is based on experience lah. Okay. The fire protection system failed to function in the recent fire tragedy in company X, Y and Z. The case could be caused by either failure of fire detection system or water deluge system failure. Or jadi kat sini kita dah nampak kita boleh gunakan or get. Okay. The fire detection system failure could be resulted from smoke detector malfunction and heat detector malfunction. This one is the event for the top of what? The top event is for the fire detection system failure. Okay. While the water deluge system failure probably caused by pump malfunction or block nozzle. So this is the basic event for the top event called as water deluge system failure. Okay. So the most top event here is protection system fail. Okay. The solution of this exercise will be explained during our tutorial session lah. Kita akan lihat dalam tutorial session nanti. Okay. So now we go to the event tree analysis. Another type of the safety analysis. Also the tree analysis. Okay. Okay. The event tree analysis is a graphical model that identify possible outcomes. It's just like the fault tree analysis. Okay. It's also identify the possible outcome, but this one is another method of drawing the diagram lah. Okay, suited for complex process involving several layers of safety system. The first is identify an initiating event that could lead to failure of the system, human error, utility failures, etc. The second one is identify intermediate events or action which resulted from the initiating event. Okay, the first layer is about the initiating event. The second layer is about the action or the result of that support the initiating event. And then each intermediate event leads to two branch. One for successful and another one is unsuccessful operation. Okay. So this one the example of the three event analysis. The first step is the initiating event columns. This one is the first step, the first layer. The second step is subsequent events usually branch in two part. Yes, it will happen or success or no, which is once. Okay, success ataupun failure. Hanya dua branch sahaja yang akan keluar daripada initiating events. Okay, this event might be more than one, hence need to list all. Dia boleh keluar lebih daripada dua lah, tapi the commonly used is two lah. And then the third step is the two column drawn for overall outcome or consequence and to calculate its probability. Daripada initiating event to the subsequent events, which is the cause of the event of the initiating event, and the last layer is about the outcome lah, the outcome or the probabilities calculation lah. As we can see kat sini, kita punya initiating event pergi ke event number 1, either success or failure. Same goes to the event number 2, 3 and 4. Okay. For example, in event number 1, success dia cabang 2, success failure dia cuma 1. Sama dengan event number 2, but for event number 3, for the success it go through another 2 path, same goes to the failure, is another 2 path. As we can see, in order to identify the outcome, there are actually the equation to be calculated lah. For example, the probabilities of the success outcome A is PIE, okay, probability of IE, initiating event, multiplied by success probability of 1S, multiplied by 2S, multiplied by 3S, and multiplied by success. This is the step lah, okay, step like. So this is the way how to calculate the probabilities of this one. Okay, the success. This one, the failure, sama, daripada sini, multiply 1S, multiply 2S, multiply 3S, pergi ke multiply 4F. Okay, sama juga dengan ni. Dia mengikut tangga. Ni ke sini, okay, ke sini, ke sini. Sama jugalah, ni pergi sini. Ya, ni pergi sini. Ni pergi sini. That's why IE multiply IF. Okay, this is the solution for the event tree analysis. Example number 1, an event tree analysis for a fluid flow problem. As we can see, the initiating event is X. Okay, X, which is correspond to the description of fails, P2 fails. Okay, and then the event layer, the event number 1, a low flow alarm sounds. Okay, yes or no? If yes, is described with the number 0.998. Okay, so the no is 1 minus 0.998 equal to 0.002. So maksudnya kat sini cabang ni the total of this path is equal to 1 lah. Kalau sini 0.5, sini akan 0.5. Sini 0.3, sini akan 0.7. Apa-apa hal memang dia akan equal to, the total is equal to 1. For example, this one, Y, for the next event, operator respond, Y is 0.952. Okay. In another branch, no is equal to 0.048. So means that 1 minus 0.952 equal to 0.048. Okay. So for this one, 0.995. So 1 minus 0.995 is equal to 0.005. But for this one is equal to 0.998 multiply 0.52 multiply by 0.995 equal to 0.945. Sama jugalah dengan ni. Yang ini sama dengan ni kali ni kali dengan ni. Ni bukan ni satu tolak 0.995 bukan 0.005. Ni 0.005 ni adalah multiply this one. Okay. So the outcome here, kalau kita totalkan, kita akan dapat equal to 1 lah. So dekat sini kita dah tahu 1 is equal to 100% of the possibilities. Tapi daripada menggunakan event tree analysis, kita boleh pecahkan, okay, the outcome of the possibilities occurred mengikut fail dengan success. Kalau fail, berapa pecahan dia? Kalau success, berapa pecahan dia? Itu maksud dia event tree. So another example, consider the event of the steering wheel failure, initiating event, we can be as the initiating event. Suppose that there is 50% chance that the driver is able to counter the failure and control the steering safely. If she cannot correct the failure, so another 50% is there may be a collision with another car lah. 50% and another 50%. There is also the possibility that driver himself might crash into the steering wheel upon impact. So the probability of a collision with another car is 0.2. Collision another car lah. So daripada 0.5 dia pergi ke 0.2 dan pecahan dia akan jadi 0.8 lah. Okay. And the probability of the driver crashing into the steering wheel is 0.3 and the another path is 0.7 lah. So we have to construct the event tree to determine the probabilities of event. So the solution is daripada steering wheel, okay, 0.5 is able to control, another 0.5 is fail to control. As mentioned kat sini lah, 50% chances that the driver is able to counter the failure. Because 50% able to counter the failure is yes. So collision is no lah, fail to control. So 0.5, 0.5. Okay, so untuk fail to control is either the possibilities of the injuries or the risk happen is collision to another car ataupun no collision to another car. Okay, so the collision to another car is 0.2 as mentioned here. Collision with another car 0.2. So the rest of the branch here is 1 minus 0.2 equal to 0.8 lah. Okay, so for the collision occur is another. Okay, for the collision occur, probability of the driver crashing into the steering wheels. Bila dia berlaku collision to the another car, dia akan ada probability to driver crashing into the steering wheel 0.3. Only collision, no injury. Collision occur and the driver injured. Dia collision occur tetapi tak, dia cuma collision saja tapi tak ada injury lah. So 0.3. Okay, samalah pecahannya 0.7 ke 0.3, 0.7 ke 0.3 kat sini. Okay, so how to determine this number is by implement the equation yang saya dah share sebelum ni lah. So means that this one is 0.5. Okay, so this one 0.5 multiply 0.2 multiply 0.7 is equal to 0.07. This one is also 0.5 multiplied by 0.2 multiplied 0.3 equal to 0.003. So if we add up all this number is actually equal to 1. So the possibilities of collision avoid is 50%. The collision, the possibility of happen to the collision and the injury happen is only 7%. Okay. The possibilities, okay, the possibility of the collision only is 3%, and then the injury to self is 28%, and then the collision avoidance is only 12%. So kat sini kita boleh tahu apabila berlakunya steering control fails, okay, what is the most risk can be happen here? The likelihood is collision avoidance. Okay, collision avoidance, and the injury. Okay, walaupun no collision tapi dia boleh kena injury. Tapi bila kalau dia fail to control and then the collision happen, okay, so the most severe is collision plus injury, which is 7% compared to 3%. This is how to read and understand this event analysis. Okay, so end of chapter 5. Selesai untuk chapter yang kelima. So in this chapter we already learn about the definition of the hazard, risk, hazard identification, risk assessment, and so on. And then we learn about how to implement the hazard process. Okay, in the hazard process we learn about the approach that commonly used in the hazard process, which is the quantitative, semi-quantitative, qualitative approach. And then we take a look about another approach of the safety analysis, which is the fault tree analysis and also the event tree analysis. Okay, so that's all for chapter 5. Thank you for watching this video until the end.